All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everyone, Tom Salemi here, editorial director of the Device Talks conferences, virtual events, and of course, co-host of this here Device Talks weekly podcast. It's great to have you back. Thanks for listening. This is episode number 20. Instead of our normal 2-interview format, we're going to do a 2-for-1 deal. I spoke with a couple of principals at Thrive Early Detection, which closed on a $257 million Series B round earlier this week. Thrive is among a small group of well-funded companies working to create simpler tests for cancer. I'm thinking of Grail and other competitors. So we'll talk with Isaac Kinde, one of the scientific co-founders, about its origins and about its product, CancerSEEK. And we'll also talk with Isaac Rowe. He's the CFO, and he'll share some details on how the company managed to raise $250 million during a pandemic. But first, it's my pleasure to chat with Chris Newmarker, Executive Editor of Life Sciences at MassDevice, to hear what companies made the biggest news this week. Chris Newmarker, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Good day to be Friday, I say.
I don't know about you, in Twin Cities, it's heading into the 70s this weekend.
It's a lovely day here in Massachusetts. I've had the windows open, no AC on. I don't know what the weekend holds for us, but we'll keep our fingers crossed.
It feels like a good weekend to grill out some brats over here. Get some brats, potentially a beer. Who knows? All right, there's 2 beers. Yeah, so a good weekend.
So this is episode number 20. Congratulations.
Yes, we're here. Woo.
So I'm thinking for our next episode, for episode 21, we should perhaps just get drunk while we do this. How's that sound to you? Less appealing?
I mean, it's 5 o'clock in the world somewhere.
Exactly,
right?
Yes. This would be the first drunken medtech podcast. I think we'll go for that, or not. But what we will do next week, and we're doing it this week, is our top 5 MassDevice countdown. Now, this week I did not take a look at the list, so I want to guess. For some reason, I'm feeling like number 1, and we won't reveal this until the end of the episode, but number 1 is going to be Boston Scientific's earnings results. And I don't know why I feel that way. I found the call to be particularly interesting. We don't need to get into why, but that might be a future podcast. But let's hit it. Let's see what the survey says. What is number 5, Chris Newmarker?
Yeah, so Tom, interesting that you were speaking about Boston Scientific earnings, because really, like, our number 5 story is about how, I mean, we're right in the middle of the second quarter, earnings seasons. We've been churning out a ton of earnings reports, and for the most part, it's not looking good. A lot of companies are taking a sales beating, amid the pandemic. But there were a few bright spots, and one of the ones really good to point out is Dexcom. I mean, they blew away the consensus forecast of Wall Street. Their sales were up more than a third in the second quarter, and it's really because they were able to successfully pivot and make their continuous glucose monitors available in U.S. hospitals during the crisis. I mean, it's just one way to have less interaction between hospital staff and patients. Be able just to hook them up to if they have diabetes, to hook them up to CGMs, to remotely monitor their blood glucose levels. And so that it's really a good story of a company that figured out a way to pivot and actually help out during the pandemic, and it's really helping their results for now. Hologic too. I mean, their sales were a bit down, but I mean their profits are up 45%, and that's really fueled by coronavirus assays. They're really into the testing space. But for the most part, though, I mean, we had results that were better than expected, results that were worse than expected. But man, these companies are just really taking a sales hit. I mean, down 24% for Stryker, down 24% for Boston Scientific, down 4.1% for Baxter, and Baxter even makes a lot of products needed to fight the pandemic, down 13% for Teleflex, down nearly 30% for Smith and Nephew, down 21% for GE Healthcare. I mean, just going on and on. It's a lot of sales hits during the second quarter. I've been hearing CEOs saying that they are seeing like some of the procedures coming back, and there's a lot of hope that we're gonna get some stuff back during the third and fourth quarters. But for now, like, man, just, their sales are down.
So Dexcom at number 5, and I should remind people that last month you interviewed Dexcom CEO Kevin Sayer for the podcast, and really dug into that strategy. So people should, if they haven't listened to that one, they should definitely go back and find it. It was a great conversation. All right, so what is number 4? Survey says.
Well, the number 4 was Smith and Nephew launching its RI hip navigation system for for hip replacements.
Woohoo!
And, woohoo! That's right. There you go. It's like, the orthopedic space especially, it's been tough, because, people can sometimes hold off a bit on getting that knee or hip replacement or whatnot, and people don't want to go into, there's a real reluctance to go into health providers right now, because you don't want to be potentially exposed to the virus. But you see companies like Smith and Nephew like really still trying to innovate and do some cool stuff, and they got this new navigation system for hip replacements. And this comes just about 2 weeks after they launched a next gen surgical robotic system, the Corey system, for knee surgeries. So they're trying to get kind of a niche and really compete with Stryker in the space. Stryker was kind of first out the gate with the Mako robots, and it's been really successful in that space. But Smith and Nephew is definitely seeking to compete with Stryker.
Well, and it's nice to see that those surgeries are seen as less elective as maybe a few months ago, and hospitals are able to get those in. So helping a lot of people in some serious pain.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at number 3. The survey says.
Well, we've got Baxter and let me see if I can pronounce this right. Yogo Health. They're expanding their partnership to for kind of like digital health products for people with kidney disease, and it's kind of about like building mobile apps and other digital solutions. But again, this is something that has a COVID connection. Almost seems like everything these days has a COVID connection. But there's been a real push to try to get more dialysis into people's homes and having more digital health solutions kind of reduces the need for people who need dialysis to interact with healthcare teams. Which anything that can kind of reduce physical interaction with people is good amid the pandemic. And this digital health partnership should hopefully help out.
That's great. Yeah, it was something we talked about in our July 21st Device Talks Tuesday. So if people are interested in what's going on in dialysis, they should definitely check that out on the website. All right, now let's moving on down the line. Number 2, survey says.
That's a good old-fashioned lawsuit story.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Yeah, I know. We got. It's interesting. I've had experts kind of telling me we're going to see like less lawsuits, more companies trying to settle, or like stay out of these kind of like legal cases amid the pandemic, because they just don't want to spend the money on it. But here we have Conformis. They jumped on board a Colorado man's denial of benefits lawsuit against Aetna, and now Aetna is claiming that Conformis is just, I think the phrase they kind of Aetna's lawyers use is that they're trying to turn the Federal Employee Retirement and Income Security Act on its head. They're saying like, oh, you're trying to piggyback on this guy's denial of benefits lawsuit in order to turn this almost into like a class action to force us to cover your knee implants. So I'm sure the papers are going to just continue to fly in this lawsuit, and we'll see how things shake out eventually.
All right. Well, I cannot stand the suspense, Chris. We're going to have to wait until after my interview with Thrive to find out what the biggest news of the week was. Can you hold on?
Sounds great, Tom. And yeah, let's save the best for last.
So once again, I spoke with Isaac Kinde and Isaac Rowe for about a half hour yesterday on Thursday. I learned a great deal of how Thrive really wants to upend the cancer diagnosis market. It's going to make it easier, they hope, for this disease in particular, for many different types of cancer to be detected during routine physicals using a blood test and some other steps as well. The company's list of investors is amazing. It's a real who's who, and I know that's a cliche, but it's very true. They've got providers, they've got payers, they've got Third Rock Ventures and other big name investors. So it's a great syndicate. I'll post a link to the article I wrote for MassDevice where they are all listed. And this Series B comes just a year after the company raised over $100 million for a Series A. So we'll find out why Thrive requires so much money. We'll open this interview with Dr. Isaac Kinde. He's a co-founder and head of research and innovation, and he'll talk to us about CancerSEEK and how it works. Let's listen.
Our approach is designed to be simple from both the patient's and physician's perspective. The way this would work would be, a patient would have a routine blood draw, and that blood draw would get sent to our lab. And at our lab, we look for signatures of cancers within these blood samples, specifically circulating tumor DNA and for altered levels of protein biomarkers associated with cancer. And then after we complete the analysis, we would return the result to the physician. And another kind of key component of our approach is that it's not just a result that we deliver. We have an integrated service model, which basically is a set of services to help interpret and act on these results as well.
What is the origin of the technology?
Thrive actually began decades ago, at least conceptually, through some of the work of our founders from Johns Hopkins, through their discovery, really, of the molecular biology and genetics of cancer. And, part of their work has been in discovery, but another important part has been developing tools to exploit the discoveries to beat cancer. And as a graduate student in their lab, I helped them develop such tools and apply them in proof of concept studies. And in 2014, we started a company called PapGene with the intent of bringing this technology to patients. But the idea was at the early beginning was leverage the local talent pool in Baltimore as well as the resources that Johns Hopkins and Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures provides to local startups. Mm-hmm. And by 2018, 2019, we were kind of well underway on what ultimately became a landmark study for one of our tests.
In the last 14 months, all of the work that was just previewed was really accelerated in a significant way because Thrive was formally incorporated as a venture-backed company with that lead investment coming from Third Rock Ventures, Third Rock being one of the most prominent biotech venture capital groups of the last 10 plus years. And they, along with a number of other premier investors, really catalyzed the growth of this company with over $110 million of funding. And so that funding has really allowed us to bring together a world-class team, put in place an infrastructure, both physically as well as with people that are experts in this field. And so now we're in a position to really bring this technology to the masses. And so, 14 months later, that's exactly what we set out to do. And that's where we are, which is super gratifying. And, as you probably know, we just this week announced the close of our Series B financing. So we now have an additional, infusion, if you will, of over $250 million that from here forward will give us tremendous opportunity to bring the next steps of the company's development to reality. So it's been maybe a long burn to get to a point now where in the last 14 months we've put a turbocharger behind it. And I think as with many things in life, timing is everything. We have not just our own technological improvements and team assembly that I mentioned, but also the fact that we're part of a broader community, a community of companies and scientists who together have, started bringing together this idea of liquid biopsy. It's a term that probably was not a common phrase 5 years ago, but I think 5 years from now will be very much something that people on an everyday sense will be aware of. It's a moment in time where the technologies and related entities have all come together to make it possible to do amazing things with blood testing. And that's one of the reasons why personally I was super excited to be a part of this mission. And it's a privilege for me to be here.
I was actually going to ask that a bit later, but I am curious about your transition. You were, from your bio on Wall Street before, you're an analyst and involved in that side of the house. This, I think, is your first startup, right? What led to that move? Were you just so excited about the story you wanted to be part of it?
Yeah, I was a Wall Street analyst for 16 years. Most of those years at Goldman Sachs, where my role was to cover the life sciences and diagnostics industries for the most part. And in that capacity, I covered something like, I did the math when I left that job. I covered something like 62 public companies during that time. It's a lot, right? And, I think if you learn nothing as an analyst in that capacity, you certainly learn one thing, which is you start to recognize patterns of what really defines success. You'd love for it to be simple, right? Just technology or, great leadership, but it's really a combination of things. And really, the core ingredients that I saw at Thrive when I was approached really checked all those boxes, right? We had foundational science from the Vogelstein lab and Hopkins. Their reputations preceded certainly, my awareness for many, many years. They were the rock stars of this space. I was thrilled to know they were behind it. I also had great familiarity with Third Rock. They've started more than 50 companies, the vast majority of whom have continued to be incredibly successful, transformative companies in biotech. And finally, the leadership team, many of the people that came in to start Thrive from the outside to harness a lot of the work Isaac and his team started with, they came from a company called Foundation Medicine, which you may know was one of the pioneers in cancer genomics. And so knowing that those three legs of the stool were already in place, I was extremely excited. And I then realized how far along the technology was, both scientifically and clinically. And I realized that there was really this moment in time to have a huge impact. And I was really thinking about this on a multi-year basis. This is really for me, just for transparency, I'm 42 years old. This is a chance for me to, over the next decade of my life, do something that I can be really proud of. And that's why I'm here. So again, it's a privilege. Isaac Kinde in particular, just one of the smartest people you'll run into. I promise you that. He is a pleasure to work with, and I'm just really excited to be a part of it.
That's great. There is something that happens when you turn 40, isn't there? Just you just want to.
And generally not good things. This is a good one.
This is definitely a good one. I need to understand then the company a bit more. I understood. I thought it was 1 year old. There's obviously a lot more to it than that. Did PepGene convert into Thrive? Was there an asset transfer there? What is the connection between the two, or is there a connection between the two?
Sure. PepGene was started with very early seed round, followed by approximately $3 million Series A in 2015. And in addition to that private capital, we had two government grants and contracts through the NCI Small Business and Innovation and Research SBIR grants and contracts totaling approximately $5 million over the course of a couple years. So that was some of the kind of early fundraising efforts, followed by an additional Series A approximately a year or two after that. And we've had started with a team of just a few people, and I think we were up to nearly in the mid-20s before Thrive came on board last year.
But Thrive, did it acquire PepGene?
That's correct. Yeah, Third Rock, there's probably another interesting piece of our origin story, which is that our co-founder, Christoph Lengauer, was for many years a part of the Vogelstein lab. And in that capacity, had a very close relationship with Bert, Nick, and Ken, our founders, and Isaac. And, it was around, I want to say 2018, 2019, that actually it was late 2018, I believe, that Bert and Christoph connected over the early work on CancerSEEK, and Christoph at that time was and continues to be a partner at Third Rock Ventures, and came to the realization that there was a huge opportunity to help PapGene, bring its technology to the next level. And so, in going back to the Third Rock partnership, worked with them to put together a plan to acquire PapGene, reconstitute the company with the Series A funding that I mentioned earlier, and call it Thrive. And so that's how we started as Thrive last spring. And, I joined right around that time in June, and a number of the other team members as well. And we started at that point with less than 30 people, and today we're over 100. So as I mentioned, that turbocharger dynamic, it's really been a wild ride in the last 14 months to really lean into the opportunity that we have with all these new resources. And so, I think we should give tremendous credit, not just to the Vogelstein team, but also the PapGene team, who really, the people who brought this technology to life, who most of whom still are with us, continuing the mission.
Absolutely. No, that's a great story. I want to focus just on the financing, then we'll go back to CancerSEEK. So what was your target for this round?
We had set a goal of raising $250 million this summer. And of course, that was the plan we laid out like last winter and last fall. And so, of course, the world changed a little bit when COVID happened. And we really had, for a couple of weeks, a little bit of uncertainty as to how this was going to play out. And so I think we're extremely gratified that, we were able to, raise a round like this that was significantly oversubscribed with what we think is an incredible world-class group of investors who all we believe will be with us for the long journey here ahead to build out the company. The Series B was a significant amount of funding on the back of already a pretty significant Series A, but we know that this will be a multi-year process. We'll probably need to raise more capital after the Series B. And so this is a moment in time where I think we can all, say it was an amazing experience. We did most of the work through Zoom. So really, you could probably do a whole nother podcast on what it's like to raise venture funding remotely, but that was sort of, and we're not the only company, but certainly it was an interesting experience. And, I think we were extremely excited about, what each of these investors brings to the company beyond just dollars.
That's terrific. And I noticed you've got institutional investors, you've got payers, you've got a provider, you have a corporate and Exact Sciences. I mean, a smaller corporate, but a corporate. Was that your intention to make sure every possible, infrastructure in healthcare is sort of part of this story? Yeah,
well, it takes a village, right? I think what we're trying to do fundamentally is novel and unprecedented in multiple ways, such that we thought we'd be well advised to have the support and input of all those types of constituents. So that's exactly right. It's something where I think we are actively looking to take advantage of all those resources because we know we'll need them. So it was purposeful, it was broad ranging, and we're probably not done.
Isaac Kinde, what has this turbocharged ride been like for you? This is an amazing 2 years.
It's been, I think, a wild ride, and it is so satisfying this turbocharge has really allowed us to fulfill our original intent, which is we have the technology, right, and we to help in our cancer fighting efforts, but we need the resources, right? We need the not just the money, but the people. And it has been really, really gratifying to see how quickly our efforts have been enhanced and the quality of people that we're adding to our team almost on a daily basis. So it's just been just really, really fantastic experience.
Talk to me about why you need this much money, and I think that would be a good combination question too. What does a clinical trial pathway look like? Where do you go from here in proving what you think CancerSEEK can do?
So, really the use of proceeds for the Series B are three principal initiatives. One is to complete the preparation work to finalize version 1 of our test, CancerSEEK, and that lab work and computational work is ongoing as we speak. The second piece is to commence our FDA registrational trial, right? We want this test to be approved by the FDA. To do that, you need to run what will likely end up being one of the largest cancer screening studies ever done. And so that will be the biggest single budgetary item that I think about over the next couple of years, that we think about the next couple of years. The third piece is to start the groundwork for our commercial strategy, because, we're talking about an addressable market, Americans over the age of 50 that are asymptomatic and healthy, so far as they know. That's approaching 100 million people. And that's not the type of a market that you want to tap into with an on-off switch. You really want to step into it with beachheads, to be gentle in your approach, to make sure you do it well. And that means the work for commercial strategy begins essentially now, well before we have approval. And so that's really the third piece, is building the commercial strategy. So that's really what the proceeds are going to be targeted for, and happy to go into more detail on all of that.
What do these trials look like?
We're starting from a position of great, I think, experience and knowledge, precisely because we already have in hand the DETECT-A study, which I touched on earlier, right? It's a groundbreaking study in what it showed, and it's given us tremendous learnings as to what you would then want to do in a clinical trial, a registrational trial context, right? Which is broader, more rigorous, so on and so on. I think a couple of governing principles. One is we know that it should be prospective and interventional. It needs to go after a cohort of patients that will, address both men and women. And we would like for it to be also multi-center, because the DETECT-A study was run within the Geisinger Health System in Pennsylvania, which is, as you probably know, one of the country's strongest health systems. We're great partners, grateful to work with them, but we need to cast a wider net to capture the totality of the U.S. population, socioeconomically and all that. And so this will be a nationwide study, right? Those are probably the three or so most important things that will be different. It will also be just larger, because we do want to ensure that we have the ability statistically to show that we can find multiple cancer types. And I say multi-cancer very purposely, because what we don't want to do is suggest that this is a panacea, right? This is a technology that can be massively transformative and exciting. You'll find cancers that you would otherwise never have an ability to screen for, but it is unlikely that it will be able to find every cancer. That is not probably, so far as we know, where this technology is likely to take us, regardless of how one does it in the near term. So having a large study looking at multiple cancers, but maybe not all of them, these are the types of things that we think are really important to demonstrate, all through the lens of safety, because the FDA, of course, needs to ensure that, whether it be in the form of overdiagnosis or unnecessary follow-up, that this type of a technology is extremely safe. We've done that with DETECT-A. We need to do it again in an FDA trial context. Final
question: what is next? You kind of referenced this at the top, that you're going to have a follow-up services sort of element to this as well. I mean, I'm 51. I go get my test. It tells me that there's presence of something somewhere. Where do we go from here? How are you working with hospitals and societies to make sure this, whatever information you are able to bring to light, is used well?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think there's a tendency, when you imagine a technology like this, to spend most of your energy and time asking about the technology, right? The mousetrap, because you want to be sure that it works, which is logical. I think once you've done that, you have to remember that you're doing all of this innovation in the context of the healthcare system, which we all know is complex. And in particular, this is technology that we intend to put in the hands of primary care physicians who, if you have any sympathy for primary care, it's been a challenging place to operate with not just COVID, but just the overall reality of high deductible plans, the rise of electronic medical record systems, all the technologies that try to funnel through those two bottlenecks. It's really difficult. And so we are spending a lot of time thinking about implementation. How do you bring a technology like this, which is new and different, how do you bring it to a primary care doctor who by definition is probably not a cancer expert, probably not a diagnostics expert, but does live within those confines? And so we've got everything from software teams to user experience teams to regulatory teams thinking about how to implement this technology into a world where in the US you're talking about over 200,000 primary care physicians in practice today, right? It's a massive and highly heterogeneous world of potential users that we want to serve and serve well. So that integrated service model, the ability to interface and provide navigation and decision support, all these tools, as well as to support patients, those are things that we're investing in, again, now, even though we are still several steps away from having broad commercial availability.
And Isaac, Ken, I just wanted to follow up. I know I said last question, but I do this sometimes. The breakthrough that you had to create PAPgene, was it detecting these materials that have come from tumors in the body, or it's not it's not the identification that those exist. It was the ability to find them in the bloodstream. Is that correct?
Find them in the bloodstream and then act on those findings in a way that could be utilized for patient care. That's what was truly the why we consider the DETECT-A study a landmark, was that we didn't just screen for multiple cancers, but we did so in a way that information could be used to intervene. And in some cases allowed a type of therapy with curative intent, meaning there's a high likelihood or a reasonable likelihood that the therapy that's applied to a patient could actually cure them from disease. So that was really the big breakthrough in the study, and kind of that study, we essentially doubled the number of cancers that could be detected by existing standard of care cancer screening methods. And I think owing to the design of the test, which is rooted in the mechanisms of cancer that have been elucidated from our Hopkins founders as well as several others in the field, but it allowed us to detect cancers from 10 different organs, including 7 of which don't have screening options today. And we detected them, the majority of them, cancers, while they're still localized or regional, meaning that they had a higher chance of being cured than more advanced cancers. And I would say the other piece to kind of really the groundbreaking work was that on top of all that, the technology is safe. We had greater than 99% specificity without any adverse events. So kind of collectively, demonstrating that, this type of blood test could work, and then showing how it could work in the DETECT-A study, where those are some of the reasons why we were quite excited from the success of the study.
Just so I understand, so the results from these tests, it's not just an indication that you have a high level of something that indicates something with your liver or another organ, but you're actually able to identify a treatment regimen that would, a therapy for that cancer? Or am I misunderstanding?
No. We don't identify the treatment regimen. So basically, the blood test suggests the presence of a cancer, and then we follow up with imaging. In our case, usually PET-CT, and that allows the practitioner to confirm where the cancer is. And then once you find out where the cancer is and the extent of the disease, the physicians involved in that patient's care ultimately make the recommendation on how to best treat that particular cancer that's identified.
So the test will move then from it'll be applied first by the primary care physician, but then once you move obviously into dealing with anything that emerges, that moves into standard oncology practices.
Yes, more or less, and that's because of that additional work that's required to actually act on the results from the test. That's why the integrated service model is so important, because it facilitates those next steps to increase the chance that the test result will actually benefit that patient.
Great, that's fascinating. And this will be my actual final question for Isaac Rowe. reimbursement? Is this something that's going to require its own code? I mean, my physical reimbursement, I'm sure, is not very great.
Right. Yeah. Reimbursement is obviously critically important to the commercial success and the access to individuals, over technology like this. It's early to speculate on exactly when and how that'll play out, but we are currently working through the existing paradigms that exist to build the evidence required to ensure that we can illustrate value. And the DETECT-A study gave us a tremendous start because it was a real world study, and we have already a team working on the health economics around it. We already have breakthrough designation from the FDA, and we're working in coalition with all the major stakeholders across the industry as well as across the regulatory environment and patient advocacy to help bring this all to bear. And so, while we don't know exactly when this will become a reality, we think all the groundwork is there. I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, the importance of timing. And I think putting the technology aside, I think the timing around bringing this to bear from a reimbursement standpoint is quite favorable because there is a critical mass across all these constituents, both of awareness and interest. And there's certainly a need. Cancer is still the second largest killer in the United States every year. Most therapies are administered to patients who are metastatic and therefore have very poor outcomes with very expensive therapy. We believe that every therapy will probably be more effective if it's applied to cancers at an earlier stage. And so, we think we can be the tip of the sword in bending the curve on cancer, bending the curve on outcomes. And, we have to generate that evidence, which is what we're working on. But we think, we're at a point in time where you can see it coming and, just stay tuned. And we're not alone. There are a lot of other companies doing it, and should give all of us comfort that it'll impact a tremendous number of people.
Absolutely. No, this is definitely one of those stories that gives you hope. So I appreciate you both taking so much time today to share Thrive's story. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It was great to hear the Thrive story, but it's even better to be back here with Chris Newmarker, Executive Editor of Life Sciences at MassDevice, with our most read story of the week. Chris, survey says...
COVID-19 testing, which little wonder.
No wonder at all. That's what we're all talking about. What was the specific story?
Well, I mean, really, the specific story was you had like Sorrento Therapeutics. They've entered into a licensing agreement with Columbia University for their COVID-19 saliva test, and they're claiming this thing's it's a good rapid one-step diagnostic test that gets results in 30 minutes. So
God, I hope so.
Yeah, I know. They're submitting for an EUA and hoping to scale up some full-scale production. So here's to hoping that the EUA lends more credence that this thing works, and we can get more tests that can quickly diagnose people. At the same time, another really big story this week was that HHS and the DoD did they did a $7.6 million contract with Hologic for more COVID-19 testing. But yeah, I mean, right now, you look at the situation, it's probably an understatement to say that the U.S. is facing challenges right now when it comes to COVID testing. So it's little wonder that any story about some kind of advance is getting attention.
Absolutely. All right. Well, another great list, another great batch of articles from our fantastic news partners at MassDevice. Chris, how can folks find you, pitch stories to you, tell you what they're up to? Where can they find you?
Hey, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. Always happy to talk with people.
Absolutely. And if folks have ideas for the podcast or our Device Talks Tuesday series, you can find me on Twitter at MedTechTom, on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, and would love to hear from you as well. That's it, folks. If you could do us a few favors, share this podcast with your friends, share it on your social media networks, connect with Chris and I. We'd love to be part of those conversations. Please give us a ranking and or give us some comments on Spotify, on iTunes. We're available through all the major channels. Would love to hear how we're doing. And finally, don't forget to read MassDevice for all the latest medtech news. And of course, tune into Device Talks Tuesdays for that in-person event experience on your computer. We're going to take a bit of a hiatus for Device Talks Tuesdays. We'll restart early in September, so keep your eye on devicetalks.com for more information.
Yeah, with everybody screaming, do we say that it's now a new season for Device Talks Tuesday?
Yes,
Season
that's
2?
right. Season 2. Yes.
All
yes.
right.
Yeah. So if you
It's going
want
to be even better than season 1. That'd be great.
Well, season 1 was pretty fantastic. And if anyone wants to binge watch season 1, it's all available on devicetalks.com as well. They're all available on demand.
Right.
So check that out. All right. Well, thanks, folks. Tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast.
Stay safe and healthy.